And it's really like a river flowing down a mountain to the sea. And what this company has done is invest in a luxury infrastructure, which in some ways is putting a dam on the river. And what we have been definitely doing the last 3-4 years and will continue to do is we are accumulating behind that dam wall a lot of the world's greatest wines.
I'm Lawrence Francis, founder of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to this special 2-part series produced in partnership with Oeno Group. Across 2 episodes, we meet Head of Trade Olivier Gasselin, focusing on their development into the on-trade and plans for future expansion, before inviting Justin Nock, MW, to explore the company's approach to wine investment and the unique relationship they enjoy with their collectors. If at any point in the series you'd like more detail on wine investment with Oeno Group, please email info@oenofuture.com. And for more info on Oeno House, their fine wine boutique, email louisa@oenohouse.com. In today's episode with Justin Nock, we first hear his origin story and transition from consultant to going full-time with Oeno Group. He discusses the company goals and gives us a 30,000-foot view of their operations. We talk financial forces on wine production before Justin brings in the wider Oeno Group wine team, talks international presence, the impact of the pandemic on the group, their recently opened fine wine boutique, Oeno House, before exploring the company culture through the lens of its owners, and looking ahead to 2022. Enjoy.
My name is Justin Nock. I'm the Director of Wine for Oeno Group. I've been in the role for only a few months at this time. It's October 2021. But I've been consulting the company for the last sort of 2.5 years, and then transitioned into the role a bit earlier this year. For the last 10 or 11 years, I've been a freelancer. So I've worked for myself, have my own company, and Oeno were one of my clients. Mm-hmm. And I had a number of other clients as well who I was doing work for. And during the pandemic, the work with Oeno initially faded away a little bit. The things that I was doing for the group were primarily helping them source wines from Australia and California, where I had direct, obvious, clear experience. And I was writing some reports and things, just analysis of what was happening in the market, trends from a production point of view, and those kinds of things. And I actually had other clients that were far busier. For example, I worked with a retailer in London, and their business took off during the pandemic, so I found that I was naturally doing a lot of that. And then at the start of this year, it became clearer, because the Oeno Group was growing and growing really quickly. There was a lot of work to be done, and the wine team asked me and started talking to me about making myself more available in 2021 to get deeper into the business. So it made a lot of sense. I was enjoying the work, and what we were doing was really interesting, and it's always exciting to be part of something that is growing quickly, and where you had you could look at things and you had a very clear opportunity to make improvements or make changes. One of the things I've noticed about working for the company too is that they've really valued my prior experience, and what I've done in the past, my knowledge, and the reputation, for better or worse, that I brought to the business. And it's helped me realise too, I've been in the wine industry for more than 20 years, nearly 25 years. It's crystallised for me that I'm entering a second part of my career where the first 20 years or so, let's say, I was definitely on the journeyman, apprentice and a journeyman. You're out working in a lot of different aspects of the industry. and that now I feel like I can bring all those things to sort of bear in one place and apply that experience, not for the betterment of myself, but for the betterment of the people that are working with me. And it's quite enjoyable to have, to be the granddad of the company in some ways, but to know that there are young people here who, I don't know, I can help out, that I can easily say that I can point them in the right direction. I no longer feel the need, for example, to go to the flash dinners and the flash trips that when you first get into the wine industry are a big, bright, shiny light. So I've done all those and been to all of those, and they're wonderful. But I know how wonderful it is to go when you've never been on them before too. So things like that have been part of the surprisingly enjoyable part of working here at Oeno. And then there are the obvious things like the fact that we've pretty much given ourselves a license to do whatever we like. So we can buy whatever wine we want. The wine team is completely trusted by the directors of the company and the sales team to know best. And if we find something that's rare, unique, exclusive, high quality, undervalued, whatever it is we think it is, we can go and buy it. And we've got a sales team that's able to sell it, which is kind of remarkable, because we all know in the wine industry how hard it is to sell some things sometimes. So it's been a real eye-opener in that sense. I'll go right back to the beginning. I got into wine in the late 90s while I was studying at university. So I was doing a master's in food science after I did a degree in industrial chemistry. And my first thesis supervisor put on a wine tasting that was far too good for us who were used to drinking cask wine. And I remember he poured a bottle of Grosset Riesling Polish Hill, and he said there's only 750 cases of this made, and it was obviously a great wine, but I remember looking at it thinking, 750 cases, is that a lot or not very much? I had no idea about some of the practical numbers of the industry. And it was while studying, I remember clearly one day I was up in the library at the university and in the food science section, can't remember what I was actually looking for, and I found a book on Penfolds, and it was actually on Max Schubert, and I'm pretty sure it was written by Hugh and Hook. And I found myself being distracted from my task and just flicking through and reading this book on Penfolds. And lo and behold, after a very odd sort of path and journey, within a handful of years, not even very long actually, probably 3 years, I found myself in the lunchroom at the Penfolds winery talking to Penfolds winemakers about a technique used in winemaking called micro-oxygenation that we'd been working on at Rosemount, and in a weird way kind of training Penfolds winemakers what to do with this sort of technology. And it was something that I never imagined would ever happen, because a company like Penfolds is obviously so esteemed in Australia and has a great reputation, and you kind of find yourself standing outside your own body talking to Peter Gago and Steve Leanert and these guys who've been making Penfolds Reds for 20 years, telling them something, going, Justin, are you sure you really should be telling them this? This is, surely they know all this kind of thing already. And I think over the years, my career has, for one reason or another, constantly been intertwined with Penfolds. The reason I was there was because the company I was working for, Rosemount, was acquired by Southcorp, who were the parent company of Penfolds. And that was the reason I found myself in the winery. Ended up working a lot with the people there, never in the winery directly as a winemaker, but as a sort of consulting winemaker. And it was one of the interactions that I had that then led to me moving to London in 2004, where I took up a role with the company as their resident winemaker. And my job was I guess, was being a diplomat in some ways, where I'd proven that I was able to get on with all the different winemaking cultures within the company. And people then trusted me to come to London and then represent their brand from a winemaking point of view, not just in the UK, but right across Europe and in the Middle East. And I ended up leaving the company and went and did different things altogether, but I kept on finding myself doing things for Penfolds. Wrote some material for them when I first went freelance. We bought a retail business in 2014, and I'd never considered selling Penfolds, but then it became obvious that we should, because we had probably more reason to be selling it than anybody. And then it was actually that connection which first brought me to Oeno Group, because I knew the founder of the company and they were looking for a buyer, and I'd indicated I wasn't available to do that on a full-time basis because of other work. But I said, I can probably help you on one or two things, and California was one and Penfolds was another. And so it's led me in here. And even this week, I found myself doing tastings and things for Penfolds. So it's been this weird, long-term, inextricable relationship, but it's been great for me personally, and I think it's been one of the most enjoyable parts of my whole career.
Being here today at the Oeno Group head office, I really feel the buzz. I really feel really what I was just talking with Olivier about, just what a young and I guess evolving company that it really is. Really buzzy, even on a Friday afternoon. And I think, what would be fantastic for me and for the listener would be really, again, just as we are sat here and as we really near the end of the year, just to kind of, give us a sense of, what is the company to you at the moment, and what does it do? What are its main aims and goals at the moment?
It's a good question, because even in the short time I've been involved, it's changed enormously. When I first started consulting to the company in about April 2019, which is not that long ago, they were in a very small office out in Bromley, and the whole company was about 8 or 9 people. Mike, Dan, a few sales guys. So I'd go out there and talk to them and pitch, and it was, buzzy. And these young guys, it was very different to what my experience of the London wine trade was, because so many people it's not uncommon that a very typical career in the London wine trade is that you go to a nice university in the UK, you've studied politics, art, history, and you do a stage or something like that, with languages maybe in France or Italy or Spain. You work in a winery and you come back and you decide, I'd love to work in the wine trade. But it's definitely a part of society or British culture that is pretty typical. And another way would be calling it the Red Trouser Brigade, that we all see in the traditional side of London. And that's not my background. I'm a mongrel Australian, really. I always have been. And so when I met the guys, and they were very much, culturally and background-wise, felt a very strong psychological alignment. And it was very comfortable to talk in a colourful, colloquial language about wine, which they found really receptive and enjoyable. It was different. The way I spoke about wine was very different to what they'd heard about wine. So we all hit it off very quickly. But even in that period of time, the company has moved office to Cannon Street, and then to a bigger office, and then to a bigger temporary office, and now to this office here in the Leadenhall Street. And the wine team itself has been carved off as a separate entity, and since we've opened Oeno House in the Royal Exchange, the wine team, and there's about 7 of us now, we're in our own office in the Royal Exchange, so we do all the buying and the sourcing and the marketing. So in a really short space of time, it's become a much bigger company, and it's gone through all the agony and ecstasy that you can imagine of a fast-growing company. And the other thing that's been astonishing is because even from the early days, most people never, particularly in the UK trade, a lot of companies don't know who we are. And in some ways, we're still defining it ourselves. But, I remember clearly having a conversation at the start of the year when we were about to go onto Sky TV, and we had a piece because we were launching and selling a very expensive bottle of champagne, a very large bottle. And I talked to a colleague, I think it was that morning, who's in the wine trade in London, a real raconteur, very well known, sells fine wine, drinks the best wine. And I told him what I was coming in to do, and he went, "Who? They sound like a bunch of bloody dodgy brothers. He'd never heard of this." And that was only 6 months ago,
wow.
In the depths of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then since then, it actually sent a really strong message to me, because the company had set its stall out by working with some very high-profile, provocative brands, very, expensive, luxurious and exclusive, not well known by the traditional areas of the trade. And when you put your hand out there like that, people straight away go, "Who the hell are you?" We also worked directly with a lot of wineries. That was our main model. And of course, so many wineries are already represented in the UK by importers. That meant that the portfolio that we've worked with was relatively unknown by the people in the trade. And the company had definitely been started and marketed and sold itself as a wine investment company, a fine wine investment company. And there are many of those, there are dozens and dozens, and many of them run from an office, and there's 2 or 3 guys on laptops and phones, and that's all they ever sort of do. So we didn't look any different to anybody else. But when he said that to me, it made me realise that, well, on the one hand, it's been great because we've been swimming under the radar, growing very quickly, unaware, which is a beautiful place to be. You want to be able to come up on someone's inside or blind side, run down the blind side and score in the corner. That's like a beautiful place to be. But secondly, we also had a job to do to make people more aware of who we are, because it's a small community, the wine trade, and we need to have a great reputation everywhere, and we need to be credible. So one of the things I've done very assiduously since taking over the wine team is to make sure we have better relationships with UK importers, for example. And I know many of them from my previous work, so it was pretty straightforward to call up all the people that I knew and had worked with and say, we've bought these from you before. I'm now at someplace else. We can buy a lot more, and we can buy really as much as you can supply us and as high as you can go. And that's coincided with the time that we've opened Oeno House, so we can have meetings there, and they walk in and they see who we are, and they see the wines, and we've got the wines and the formats and the luxurious positioning. And I've had more than one importer sort of have a meeting and look at us and go, with their mouth slightly open, and go, "Who are you guys?" Bloody hell, it's been really surprising. So we're going through that sort of phase at the moment, which is really great.
I think what would be really interesting, and I think it would, again, build on the earlier conversation I had, would be, I guess, first of all, to kind of get essentially like the 30,000 foot view really of Oeno, and just sort of, talk us through in your own words, like the flows of wine really that run through the company. And maybe as well, as you say, you've already mentioned the wine team a couple of times, maybe just as well talk about those different arms of the company and how they sort of coordinate as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple idea, but it's also, as far as we're aware, relatively novel. We don't see anyone else quite doing what we're doing. So no doubt the core of the business is what we call Oeno Future. That was the original company. That's the wine investment part. That's where we have most of the staff employed. That's the engine that allows us to buy and sell to clients really effectively. But that gave us as I said earlier, no point of differentiation. So Mike, one of the company owners, not long after investing in the company, created another group called the Oeno Group, and Oeno Future was part of it, and he wanted other parts of the company to do more than just that. And that's where we created the Oeno Trade and Oeno House. And these are, from an investor perspective, these are the two arms that allow us to liquidate clients' portfolios. Which, as far as we're aware, no one else really does. I mean, there are other companies, famous companies in London who also sell fine wine, and by virtue of that, people end up investing in it and selling it later on for a profit. Some of them even have a wholesale arm. Some of them had wine bars at various times in shops, but maybe not so deliberately linked up. I think some of those things have happened organically over a long period of time, whereas it's been a very strategic step by us to do it quite quickly. But the beauty of it is we know in the wine business is a capital-hungry business. And we know it costs a lot to own vineyards and grow grapes. It costs a lot to make wine. If you're making fine wine, it takes a long time for it to reach its peak maturity. We've seen that the cost of wine has gone up as well. Part of that is driven by people trying to generate cash so they can fund, the capital-intensive activities of making wine. And we know that, it's been long known in the UK wine trade. It's a super competitive market, very open, very easy for people to set up new companies. And holding inventory is the biggest drag on any company's, vitality. And it's what sends, businesses to the wall. They might be profitable, they might have a wonderful portfolio, but if they're not generating enough cash, away they go. So what's happened by virtue is that the Oeno Future arm of the business is allowing us to finance an incredible inventory, which we can then supply to the trade or to the private collector at the right time. So it's very powerful for us to be able to approach wineries where they're making wines that are top quality. They know they won't be at their peak for 5 or 10 years, and we know from the way the fine wine market works, to have a great reputation in the long term, you have to demonstrate that your wines have age-worthy capabilities. So when we can go to them and say, we can buy your wine and we can sit on it for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever you like. Let's build a plan to do it, because our collectors are willing to finance that for us, and we can release it down the track when we think the wine's ready or getting ready to be drunk. Of course, the side of that is that the collectors then get a return for that, but they're happy with it, because wine is it's a fun investment for them to invest in. It's seen to be safe because of it's a physical asset. It'll never go to zero. A bottle of wine will always be worth more than nothing, which is really important. And the fact that it sort of has these characteristics of being, depending on the way we buy it, sell it, market it, or the age we have it, wine has this ability to be an asset that can mimic other asset classes. So for some people, it's like gold. It doesn't really go up much in value, but it's a great store of value, and it's a beautiful hedge against inflation. And this is something that's of interest to people right now, as we're all starting to think about, the huge wave of inflation that it feels like we're in or about to enter.
And there's that scarcity as well, isn't there? There's only so much that you can make of a certain brand or... Exactly.
In fact, that's the best inflation hedge of all. If there's only so much to go around, and we know it will always be in demand, if inflation goes up, well, its value will go up as well. So in that sense, wine can be like gold, or it can be like blue chip property, where it does go up in value over a long time steadily, regardless of inflationary forces or other economic forces. You might not make much rent off it. It won't finance itself in that sense, but if you hold it for a long time, it will, double or triple in value. And that's pretty much the classic way to invest in wine too. You buy something and hold it for 10 years. But we have other ways of doing it for our collectors as well. So we can buy wines that are intended to sell to restaurants that are never meant to go up in value, but sell frequently. And you make a lower return, but you make it more often. And in this sense, they're more like a share that pays dividends, like a utility or a petroleum stock or a bank, and maybe the capital appreciation is not that high or not what you're in it for, but you're a retired investor and you just want cash income, and it's better than earning interest in the bank. So you've got that. And then people have all other kinds of reasons. They might be, they want to give money to their kids, but they don't trust their kids not to blow it all in the first year of the inheritance. So they put it into wine because it takes a while to liquidate. Or, we're finding, some people invest in it because there's capital gains tax advantages in the UK, where wine is seen as a wasting asset, so it's exempt from capital gains tax. That's attractive to some people. There are other people who are running a family trust or a family office, and they're just looking to diversify into something that's not bonds, safe as bonds, but paying better interest rates. So we get to think about all those things on the one hand. This is where my role with the sales floor in particular is most acute. I quite enjoy that. I don't have a background in economics, but I always enjoyed economics, and I love understanding the market forces that drive anything. And I think it's really important in wine. And I've also always taken a view that if you understand the economics of the wine industry well, it can help you understand the trends in consumption that come along, because while we always like to think that those trends are driven by maybe climate change or people discovering new regions, that's true. But there are also plenty of examples where it's driven by economics and cash flow and profitability. And you can get some really good examples, like I think of the rise of the natural wine movement, in particular in the last recession, 08, 09. I mean, it had been around, but it really took off. And you think of it from just a business model perspective, natural wine doesn't rely so much on the origin. It's a style of philosophy of winemaking.
You mean on the label, really, and having the appellation stamp on it?
You're not trying to compete against Bordeaux or Burgundy. You're making something that's fun to drink. So you can go to regions where the grapes are less expensive. If you're a young producer looking to make wine, you can make it and sell it quite quickly. Maybe making pet nat or something like that as well, so it's better for cash flow. You don't need to buy expensive winemaking equipment because you can rent it. You don't need oak barrels. You don't need to pay for yeast and, all these other things. So there's all these kinds of other elements that, just from a purely business model perspective and cash flow perspective, those things are important drivers of changes in consumer tastes as much as what people actually like to drink as well.
So, super interesting example as well, because I think, again, it's probably the people who are drinking it, that's probably the furthest thing from their mind.
Completely.
But actually, there are reasons driving that particular style. You can't afford the new oak. You can't afford to wait so long. So it potentially drives a style of winemaking that you've just laid out there.
And it gives you a point of differentiation that gives you some kind of pricing power. So if in the late 2000s you were making an oaky Cabernet, you were competing against massive companies with economies of scale and marketing spend and very fixed prices in the market. So you could never, ever justify charging a premium at all. But by doing something completely different, you create a new category, and then the ceiling of price is completely different, and you can work in different ways.
Really interesting. And I guess, in a sense, it sounds as though there's been a sort of a journey of discovery. And you said you've come and you've not been an economist in the past, but this is obviously now something that you having to keep a track of. Is that a part of your job to actually then start to predict and start to think about what might be the wider economy out there? What might that mean for even wine production and wine consumption?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, subconsciously or not, I guess that's where the conversation's arrived. But in our minds, we are always looking for quality, right? We want to find things that are great. It's always powerful, even for us in our company, to find things that are a bit different. Where the story is incredibly interesting. It might be a top new producer from Sicily, making wines on Mount Etna, or someone doing something incredible in Campania, making wines that are released with significant bottle age, which no one else is able to repeat. Or we go and find a much loved but forgotten producer in the mountains of Napa and bring them to the UK. Yes, that's exactly what we want to do. Because, Bordeaux is obviously a big part of the industry, but it's super competitive. Everybody does it. I've honestly put my hand on heart every time I've been here and said, we can't be better at Bordeaux than any of the other merchants here in the UK that have been doing Bordeaux for 200 years. We will never be better than that. We might have a different view on it, but we'll never be better in that sort of sense. So I never want to take them on at that. I want to take them on at things where we can be the best. And you mentioned our wine team. This is where it does play to us. I'm obviously Australian. We deal with some Australian wine. I'd love to deal with some more, but the pandemic has probably not facilitated that. I've worked a lot in California, so that's a strong area for me. Our head buyer is Italian. He's got a phenomenal knowledge of what's going on in Italy and personal relationships with some of the really best producers in Italy. And that's always been a strength for us. Olivier is obviously from France. He's got great connections right across France. We've got Almudena, the first female Spanish MW working for us in Spain. She's a winemaker, so she acts as a talent scout for us there. And we are looking at other areas as well. Our marketing manager is Greek. We've just hired someone who's South African, a guy I used to work with. So we're truly multicultural, cosmopolitan. And we're never going to be monodimensional, trad, Bordeaux, Burgundy only.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And I think, we're obviously getting in tune here because the point of the story that we didn't so much touch on earlier with Olivier, and that's great why we're able to broaden things out, was actually getting that maybe now sort of 60,000 foot view almost, but widening it out, because I know and I've seen that, and we did speak about some of the ambitions for international kind of expansion, but what does or do all of the kind of flows that you've spoken about there and all the sort of services that you've spoken about, do they run sort of cross-border or and through specific offices and sites in different countries, as we may have seen on your website?
They do, but it's more from a client perspective. So the main hub of the business is here in the UK, and we do have offices in different countries, and we have people working on the ground for us in various places as well. But mostly the clients that are based, they might be particularly in Europe, but they can be in North America. We have more from South America these days and some from Asia, even Australia. So it's truly international client base. But the wine is pretty much, at this point in time, all brought to the UK, or with all the supply chain issues we're talking about, on its way to the UK. And the idea is that we market it and sell it from here. And we never want to obviously impinge on people's existing distribution agreements. I'm well aware of the sensitivities of producers and how hard they work to establish good distribution with ideal partners in various places. But one area where we can work concurrently with other importers is if we buy some of the top wines that maybe their local or their current importer doesn't, and then we can store them and age them for a while and release them as mature stock, then they work in a complementary fashion, not in a competitive fashion, which is really great for everyone. And when we do look to open up a Oeno House, we are looking at Miami obviously next year, and Venice potentially in the year that follows. If we've got stock here in the UK that we can sell through there that's ready to go and it's unique, we'll definitely put it through those venues as well, because they give us a point of difference there. And that's pretty exciting for us, I think. We don't aim to really sell in Europe. It's a much more challenging environment, I think, or well serviced by many others. What we want to do, though, is build a great collection in one place. So I do have a view of what we are doing, and it's really like a river flowing down a mountain to the sea. And most people, I guess, the wine industry, in a way, they survive off that river. Is they go down once a day and they take a bucket of water back and try and farm their little piece of land in that way. They're small business. It's full of small businesses like this. And what this company has done is invest in a luxury infrastructure, which in some ways is putting a dam on the river. And what we have been definitely doing the last 3-4 years, and will continue to do, is we are accumulating behind that dam wall a lot of the world's greatest wines. And once we have that, two things are really important. One is we need to let the world know that we've got it, but people will find it when they start seeing how big it is and how deep it is. We've seen this with other companies that have created these amazing collections that the world ends up finding their way to your door, the old Field of Dreams approach. If you build it, they will come. But the other side for me that's super important to think about is dams have to flow as well. So you can't just keep accumulating. It's not good for the health of the dam, for one.
And the ecosystem as well.
And that's the other side of it. Exactly. The river has to live, right? So you don't want to destroy the river, but you want to make sure it continues to flow and everything feeds down the... But what you do want to do is obviously create an environment that's safe and happy and, fertile for people to live and grow. So that's kind of the way I think about it. So the role that we've got, Oeno Future, is really our dam, if you like. It gives us the ability to build up that collection. And Oeno Trade and Oeno House and houses will be where we allow the wine to flow.
Very poetic. Other than investment, is there a particular reason why this hasn't been done in that holistic way in the past that you know of, or is that sort of speculation really about why it's not been done?
I think, again, to go back to the economic thing, what are all businesses trying to do fundamentally? They're trying to solve some kind of economic problem in some way. And, there are very simple mechanisms in life and business. Profit and cash flow are the two things that really underpin all businesses. Maybe market share is something else, but, wine is acutely affected by cash flow. So people are always thinking of creative ways to solve that. Part of that is to try and be more profitable. So things like being more vertically integrated and owning the whole supply chain at various times in history have been what people have done, until someone comes along and changes it and they decide, no, we don't want to be vertically integrated, we're going to be more horizontally integrated. And the whole history of the world has just gone from one to the other. I think any time why would one be more popular than the other? When you find that you have perhaps oversupply situations in the wine industry, you can get wine anywhere, grapes everywhere. It probably pays to be more horizontally integrated because supply is plentiful and you want to try and capture as many different ways to the consumer as you possibly can. And that's been a path to profitability. But at other times when the supply of something has become more restricted or constrained or limited or controlled, that's when people say, well, there's profit by having ownership and control of that, and I can have more profit if I control the production, the distribution, and the retail, and businesses can go that way. So in that sense, the structure of businesses reflect where the global wine industry is in terms of supply and demand. And I always joke too that the whole reason that there's so many people employed in the wine industry relative to the size of it. I think globally it's been pointed out it's about a $300 or $400 billion sort of industry, but there are millions of people who work in the wine industry. Many people well paid, many people not well paid. But there are two things that we know. One is that the change in supply of wine, the vineyard cycle and the wine production cycle is a very long arc, and the change in consumption patterns is a much shorter arc. It's a very high frequency wave versus a long frequency wave. And the reason why there's so many of us employed in the wine industry is we're constantly trying to make those two things join up. And that's it, We're trying to find ways to make wine, rosé is a trend when there's an oversupply of red grapes. Simple.
Probably the largest force that's affected those listening and us here in the last sort of 2 years, and certainly since you joined Oeno, has been the global pandemic. And I wonder, as we are now, more than 18 months into the pandemic, whether I could ask you to, almost again, sort of zoom out, really, and potentially talk about, I guess, the journey of Oeno over that time. What have been some of the sort of key adaptations potentially that have been made over that time, and maybe even, some of the things that have just become more difficult, and it's just been, a part of a new reality to just realize that they're not going to be as easy as they used to be.
It might seem ironic to say this, but I think Oeno is only just starting to be affected by the pandemic. So if we think about where the company was when it arrived, it was Oeno Future. We had plans for Oeno House, but not a single stone was cast, nor a venue set. We had only just launched our first trade tasting, literally in the few weeks until very late February. So that part of the business was nascent and completely, not even operational. And the pandemic arrived, and for a company like us, it improved our business. Why? Pretty many obvious reasons. People were stuck at home, couldn't travel, couldn't go out, couldn't eat and drink anywhere, couldn't see friends, couldn't do anything. They could buy wine. So it was very easy to sell people wine. We had people's attention. So we found our business grew significantly. And by our business, I just mean Oeno Future, because that's what we really were during the pandemic. So we've had our strongest trading ever and continued to grow right through the whole pandemic. The hardest part for us at times has been to secure the volumes of top quality wine that we want, because there was a period, for example, where champagne was in particularly prestige cuvées were readily available in the first part of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden not so readily available by the end of it, and now everything is on allocation. Now, since the pandemic we're not at the end of it, we haven't put it behind us, but it feels like we're closer to the end than the beginning, and we're seeing things normalise a bit more in the UK. So what that means is that people from a work perspective, our client investors, are now more engaged back in the office, and maybe they don't have as much time to talk to our portfolio managers. So people are busier with their normal lives. We are very successfully trading with top restaurants, which has been great for us, because there's, and I don't mean this in any sort of, cock a hoop or anything sort of sense compared to the difficulties other people have had, but there have been a lot of new openings in London. There's been many, many top quality openings in London. It's been notable, even on a global basis, how dynamic this has been. And that, for someone trying to list wines for the first time, that's been a huge advantage. The classic story whenever you're trying to sell wine in London is, we love your wines, but we already work with blah, 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 blah. So we have to kick out one importer if we're going to work with a new one. But with new openings, you've got blank slates. So it's opened many, many doors for us. So it's actually been really beneficial for our trade. And the other thing where it is really only starting to affect us is because we sell wine, might be en primeur, or when we get access to it, it's still at the winery. And our collectors are buying and holding for long periods of time, so they don't need it immediately. We haven't been affected by the supply chain issues so much, but now the supply chain issues are really starting to impact us. So we have been trying to get wine from North America, for example, for about 9 months. We deliberately stopped in the middle of the summer because we need refrigerated containers. They became way too expensive, so we just stopped. We're only just getting back to reordering them now. Mostly that doesn't affect us too much, but for our trade side, where we are now selling quite a lot of wine into the trade, that's where the pandemic is actually affecting us, because the supply chains are in all kinds of bother at the moment. It's a nightmare, and we've seen the costs of shipping in some cases increase tenfold compared to even the start of the year. And that's obviously going to have a big impact on this economy in 2022.
Yeah, it's something that I've spoken about with other importers before, and it would seem as though the thing that made us here one of the best places to drink wine, largely because we don't really produce it, at the sort of scale as of most people, and we can then sort of pick and choose and get it from New Zealand and California and all these sort of far-flung places. But it's actually ultimately then that thing that might and is being massively affected by such a slowdown.
Well, I think one thing that's been overlooked is, in theory, the idea has been that while trade with the EU has become more difficult, certainly not any easier, not any faster, not any simpler, not any cheaper, the idea that it could be replaced with trade from the New World in particular, because we already have the trading relationships in place and the paperwork hasn't changed and all those sorts of things. That's true, but what's happened in practice is that just because trading with the EU is more difficult hasn't made it any smaller, and the UK still imports mostly wine from Europe. But the problem is, because it's more difficult and time-consuming, and all the resources on importation are focused on trying to fix EU-related import problems. And that is having an effect on the importation of wine from other places, because they're stuck in a queue. They're at the end of the chain. So the theory is right, but the practice is well out,
Hopefully, as I always say, this is a moment in time that you can listen back to this in 6 months, a year's time, and you can just think, damn, I'm so glad that's all done and dusted, and we don't have to think about that.
I really hope so, but I don't have any real faith that by this time next year, the sort of intractable issues we've got with the EU will be that much better. I think those things have sort of been structurally put into place, and we're going to have to be dealing with those and be used to living with those for a long time to come. Now, getting better container rates and things like that should improve as the pandemic alleviates, because there'll be more people back at work in the right places, containers will be back in the right places and things like that. That will help.
But there's other underlying factors.
Structural issues are here to stay,
I think a really interesting point that you made there around the impact of the pandemic was, people, I guess in a very positive way, people coming back to work, and people, as you say, not having the amount of time that they may have had earlier in the pandemic. And I just wonder, does the opening and the plans for expansion really at Oeno House, does that play into that, actually having that location really where collectors can actually be, they can take people, they can have a physical presence, and they can enjoy really the sort of the wine and the more sort of flavor some side of investing.
We've been waiting for things to normalise from that sense quite eagerly. So Oeno House, funnily enough, was originally meant to just be a boutique, like a fine wine shop. And the City of London doesn't normally permit external, seating and all this sort of stuff. But when the restaurant trade reopened in April this year, you could only reopen if you had outdoor seating. So they eased their sort of normal restrictions and allowed other businesses to do it. And so when we opened in a soft launch in June, that's what we did, and we did in August. And I can't see it really going back, to be honest. It's added a nice sense of colour to that part of the Royal Exchange. In fact, I was talking to a client the other day in a tasting who used to work in the city as a trader in the 80s and 90s, and he said that back part of the Royal Exchange used to be full after work of the old futures traders and commodities traders in their coloured aprons and stuff, slamming beers at the end of work or drinks, and it was an incredibly raucous, vibrant place to hang out. So to think that maybe some of that is coming back in a more civilised, sophisticated way feels quite nice. But I think we want people to come down and be able to enjoy wine in that sense. It's meant that the first phase of opening Oeno House has been more that more than the boutique. And I think over Christmas we'll start to see more of the boutique side. But it does mean we're going to open another unit right next to it where we can do year-round trading, more food and things like that, which I think would be a better experience even for sitting down and enjoying wine there.
Is it then difficult really to put together a list, given that, again, the dam has been sort of built up by Future and you've got this outlet now through House? Is that then almost a sort of a logistical, nice problem to have, but a challenge really to represent really all of the wines that are in the stock?
In a way, yes. And I'll say this is because this is the one aspect of our model that is very different. The stock in Oeno House is mostly owned by the collectors. So to sell it, we have to ask their permission. We can't just take it out of bond, put it there and sell it and tell them. So that adds an extra step. This is part of the complication of the model in some sense. Maybe this is why other people haven't done it in the sense they started going down this path and they thought, that's too hard. It's not easy for sure. So we're working hard to make sure we've got a way of dealing with it. But what that step is just simply getting approval from the client to sell it out. And sometimes they don't want to. They might really genuinely want to build a much bigger collection of something really special. Obviously, it depends on the wine being ready to be drunk as well. So, that does add its own logistical challenge for sure. So, while our intention was perhaps to be more or less exclusively client-owned wines in there, from a simply practical, pragmatic point of view, we have to have some of the stock in there that we can buy and move quickly. That is just bought in more traditional ways, more typical ways. So, we don't have to go through that process.
Maybe just a sense of the wine list, and a sense of, what is, or what would Oeno House be most known for, in customer feedback, collector feedback?
There's two parts of it. It is quite small. It's a beautiful little site. In the entrance area, we have probably the feature part of the shop, which is a sort of lava wall, and we have single bottles displayed on that. At the moment, it's got a lot of magnums of wines that people who know wine would recognise, but not everyone necessarily would. Of course, we have some of the first growths from Bordeaux, not all in magnums, but we have DRC Latache there in magnum. We've got Screaming Eagle in magnum. We've got Giacomo Conterno Monfortino in magnum. Giacosa, 1989, Etichetta Rosso, in double magnum. So we've got some really lovely large formats there. In the lockable fridges, we have a wonderful collection of DRC, including some magnums in there. And in the other fridge, we have maybe the UK's best, certainly one of the best single collections of Costurie. We also have a number of our most important direct agencies. So Ball & Croft, super exclusive champagne. And on the mezzanine upstairs, more of those types of things. And that might surprise people. They're not the blue chip things that we recognise, like those brands I just mentioned, but we have Silver Heights from China, for example, top producer. We have Domino de S from Ribeira del Duero is doing gorgeous sort of Burgundian style wines. We have Fiorano from Italy, just north of Rome. Things like some of the top wines from Argiano. So a range of different things. So they're really talking about the wines that we have either exclusivity or some exclusive arrangement to show off what we do, individually and uniquely. The idea is that whatever we do has got to be luxurious and the best. So the good example is the coffee. We wanted to work with a particular coffee, and the guy supplying it is Italian, and his condition of entry was that we bought the greatest Famer, coffee machine, because that's the only thing suitable for making that coffee. So from that point of view, everything is, it's all Rolls-Royce material.
What I'm also probably struck by, coming to Oeno House, coming here to the office, and now by talking to both yourself and Olivier, I think it's just the spirit to kind of give things a go, and a real Action first, I would say, is what I'm really picking up. And I wonder then, who we won't get to speak to on this series, but it's actually the owners and the people who are at the top of the organization. Would you kind of give us a sense of that and kind of bring them into the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, we said at the start it's a young company, not only in actuality but in terms of the people and the culture here. That is true, and that extends from the owners as well. So Mike and Dan runs the sales floor, and Mike is the CEO of the group, and provides more of a visionary role. They're both young. I mean, they're younger than me, so they're young, and they add a lot of flair to the business that I've not seen in other wine companies. I think we all know that the reputation of the UK wine trade, probably any wine trade in some cases, but certainly in the UK, is there's a certain conservative nature to it. And we're all very well aware of the cost limitations and the sales limitations, difficulty of growing and those sorts of things. And what's refreshing from their point of view, and particularly when I deal probably more with Mike directly on these kinds of discussions, is what we want to be as a group, and that's luxury. And a good example is when we opened Oeno House. We were talking about doing some nice tastings for the media, showing off some of our direct agencies was the idea and so forth. And Mike's like, what's the best tasting we can do? He goes, can we do a DRC tasting from large formats? And we were like, so we actually looked into it, and we were like, yeah, Mike, I mean, we could, but it is seriously expensive. And he's like, okay, fair enough. What about first growth Bordeaux's? Let's do a horizontal of all the first growths from a great vintage. What's a great vintage? I've said, well, 2010s, a bit young, 05, 2000. Let's do the 05s. So that's what we did. So we sourced the wines, and over 3 nights we opened. For 3 nights we opened a case each of the 5 first growths, and did tastings on the terrace at Oeno House. And it's shocking, like I've tasted the first growths a number of times and various vintages. Never have I tasted the 05s, never in that sort of, level of intensity. And it's a shock to those of us who work in the wine trade and the buying sense. Our buying team, one of the things that's inculcated in you when you're looking for wine is value as well as quality, right? You've always got that sort of preposition in your mind. So when the owner of the company just says, buy the best and pour it for anyone who's coming, that's quite confronting, and you have to get used to that sort of approach. But what he's saying to us is, we are not a plane that's going to fly 300 feet. We're not a Cessna. We're not going to fly at 300 feet above ground level with all the other Cessnas. You do know there are other people up there flying faster at a much higher altitude, and they are not interested in what is happening at ground level. That's where we're going. And that's quite fun to work with. I've never really seen that in a wine company until I came here.
And they've come from other industries then, and kind of brought
yeah, that's right.
A different cultural input, really. Yeah,
I mean, they are both young guys. They're in their 30s. They come from a luxury asset background. Mike used to work with art and open galleries in Europe, and very hard worker, self-driven, very successful at sales. And Dan has become an amazing sales guy as well over the years. They're just focused, driven young blokes who are just going out and doing it. And they walk the talk, They don't look like most of us in the wine trade. They really are setting out to do the best.
What will be super interesting, again, just to sort of, capture a little bit around what's happening right now in the companies, is really that customer journey. I'm very keen to kind of almost paint a bit of a picture to anybody who's listening and thinks, okay, that sounds like, a sort of company that I'd like to explore and maybe get some context around. And what do you see as a sort of typical customer journey at the moment?
If we think about the original type of customer we've got, then they're the investor collector who mostly are looking for the financial return. So some of them have been with us for 2 or 3 years. So we're at a stage now, even though we say to people mostly wine investments are medium to long term, 5+ years for sure. We are now starting to get some customers who want to liquidate part of their portfolio. They've seen that we've got a Oeno House, they've seen we've got a Oeno Trade, and they want to start seeing what that is looking like. So that's adding a new, I guess, weight to the wheel of what we're doing. It's showing another part of the business, which is great. But what I also want us to talk about are the fact that we're starting to attract people who are not just looking at it from a financial point of view, but people are now looking at what we've got because they want to own a collection. They may sell it, they may not, they might drink it. Ideally, that's what I really want people to be doing. I can understand what we're doing in terms of providing business solutions for people and providing returns to people. But I'd never got into the wine industry because I wanted people to invest in it. That wasn't the point of view. All of us got into wine because we love it and we love drinking it and we're fascinated by it as a topic, and we all collect it and have cellars at home. And look, I have bought and sold wine at various times, usually to satisfy a need that I had, buying into a business or buying a house or something like that. So it was pretty simple. It was going to make a difference to my life overall. But all the wine I've ever bought really is to drink it. So this is the exciting part for us, for me, is that we are now starting to get people who want to drink the things that they can see that we've got. And I want more of them to know who we are and what we're doing. Because I'd like to sit down and drink a few things with them.
and that's just the important part of having that physical presence, isn't it? And just having those doors that you can kind of throw open.
But even last night, we've been doing these Penfolds events down at Oeno House this month. Thursday nights are very busy down there, and we saw people sitting down there. We saw someone drinking a bottle of Grange at the right at the front of Oeno House last night, and you go, "That's it. This is what we are doing in action." Everyone's happy. Everyone comes out of it very happy. The collector, the producer, the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. That full cycle. And what about actually the customer journey in terms of the attracting new collectors? I mean, is that quite a sort of a sophisticated network, really, and referrals? And give us a sense of how new collectors kind of come in and join the fold.
A lot of it is coming from referrals now. So where people who've already invested are referring their friends, but it all is contingent on them feeling comfortable that everything is working. They're satisfying their goals, and then they will start talking about it. So in that sense, the referral process is, I think, in my mind, where we'd like to have most of our leads. Word of mouth is not only cost effective, but it's probably the most effective.
Are there specific sort of perks now that you're able to offer for collectors now that I guess that you have Oeno House, or other types of perks that we maybe haven't spoken about yet?
Yeah, we've developed some really strong partnerships with restaurants here in London, as an example. So the Oeno Group, who do fantastic, hand-selected, hand-reared beef from Piedmont. We've been there a number of times. Food's amazing. We've now got a partnership arrangement with them where anyone who's a client of Oeno can go through a reservation process and, not necessarily get better access as such. It all depends on being able to get in, but can certainly be well looked after and can dine at a discount. And we're looking at the same with the Italy group here that's just opened up. So we'd like to do more of those kinds of partnerships. We also plan to do that for our trade partners as well, that we will, it's a bit busy at the moment in the trade, but next year, people who are buying from us and very good clients of us in the restaurant sector, we'll be able to take them on trips or invite them to really exclusive tastings at Oeno House. Not just of things we want to sell them, but just of great bottles we want to open and taste and share in a sense of conviviality and, you know, shared learning. So those are all things in the pipe for sure. We want to share our knowledge and expertise, and, you know, our head buyer is now just been accepted into the Institute of Masters of Wine. So he's going to the first year seminar next year. I would love to be able to, you know, I've been involved in the education committee at various times over the last 10 years with the Institute. So I'd love to be able to show members of the Institute, particularly student members, some of the world's greatest wines that we have access to, because we all know that tasting those wines is becoming harder and harder on your own bat.
Looking ahead, you know, as we're already nearing the end of the year, and of course looking forward into 2022. I'm just curious, you know, what sort of front of mind for you in terms of the development of your role, but then also for the development of the wider company?
Specifically for us, when we're adding members to the wine team at the moment to give us a bit more, we just need more help. We're all pretty stretched. We're all working very hard and long hours. And, you know, because the company is growing, it's like a circle expanding. And, you know, maybe, you know, we've all got the sort of shields on the outer of the circle, but as we get bigger, we get more exposed to the workload. So we need to bring in more people to help cope with that. So I see more and more of my role actually managing people as much as anything, making sure the people we've got the right people in place and the right mix of skills and stuff like that, which I never ever thought I'd be doing 12 months ago. And I just want us to be more professional overall. You know, we've added, we've got Effie who's joined us in marketing, which is just, we've been desperate for that this year, and we've got a logistics guy starting next week, been desperate for that. Those two areas will help us, I think, be even better with some of our agencies and so forth, where we can do more, write better marketing material, have more information for the trade, start to advertise those, particularly once those wines start to arrive properly in the UK too. That's been the other challenge. I'm really looking forward to some of the things that we've added in the last year that people don't know that we've got. I'm looking forward to them arriving in the UK. I want to say this year, but I'm realistic. It could be early 2022. Fingers crossed. We'll certainly be able to sell them and put them in the right places in 2022. And I'm really looking excited because everyone in the wine team has found something great this year to bring into the portfolio. I think we're all looking forward to being able to put those in the trade and be very proud of what we're sort of bringing to the party.
A huge thanks to Justin Nock MW for your time and sharing the current state of play in Oeno wine and the wider wine trade. Do see below for the Oeno Group website and main social media handles. And for more details on wine investment with Oeno Group, please email info@oenofuture.com. And for special tastings or private events at Oeno House, which boasts a private 10-person tasting room and outside alfresco terrace, email louisa@oenohouse.com. That brings the Oeno Group series to a close for now. All that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to Olivier, Justin, and everyone at Oeno Group for allowing me to help spread the word about your company at this point in its evolution. Please make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine to be alerted when the next series goes live. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.